Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, and let the roll reflect that majority of the members, all the council members are present and a quorum has been established. Council members, are there any corrections to the minutes from the workshops or the regular meeting on August 7th? Okay. Comments from the audience. At this time, we'll take comments from the audience. If anybody is wishing to speak to the council at this time via in the room or email. No one on Zoom. Okay. Council members, are there any council items to be considered? Okay, council, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Fox? And Councilmember House? Discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye.
Recording
Aye.
in progress.
Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Tonight under Parks and Recreation, we have an agreement amendment, number 1, with Apex Facility Solutions LLC, and to give us an update on this is Chris Jenkins, our Parks and Rec Director. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Yes, as you mentioned, we are here for the Hastings Civic Arena. This is the refrigeration and the roofing project. And we have an agreement with Apex. They're our design engineers, basically our general contractor as well for the project. And through this energy efficiency agreement, we wanted to bring each step back to the council step by step, and we'll do that via an amendment to the master agreement. It's a little distracting to look at you.
Keep chewing.
It's good humor.
On the little one to the left, put it on the podium.
I don't know, I'll just turn you away, it's fine.
Classic.
All right. So, amendment number 1. This covers the motor control center for the refrigeration plant, which again is that long lead item, 50 to 70 weeks. So the design and engineering has been completed for the refrigeration plant. Qualified bidders were welcomed to come and check out the project and provide their bids. Those bid tabs are in the council packet. So in this particular case, it did wind up being low bid for each of the different components of the refrigeration project, but all highly qualified contractors. So in order to order that motor control center, we need to do that very soon so we can have ice in October of 2024. And that cost is not to exceed $258,929. And again, this is a guaranteed price through this process. The second piece of that is the West Rink roof. Again, bidders welcomed out, qualified bidders welcomed out, and provided bids, and the price of that is $1.16 million and change. And what we're asking for tonight is for council to approve this amendment to the agreement, and with that, we can get rolling with ordering the motor control center and guaranteeing that roofing price for 2024. That is a 2024 cost, even though it was bid now, but we don't want those quotes and bids to expire. So with that, I can stand for questions. We also have Rob and Greg here from Apex as well, if there's any technical questions that I can't answer, which there could be.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. Council, any questions? Councilmember Fox.
Your Honor, thank you. Chris, thanks for making this a priority and getting these numbers to us as quickly as possible and keeping this project moving forward. Rob and Greg, thanks for being here tonight. I move to approve the agreement amendment number 1 with Apex Facility Solutions LLC.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Second by Councilmember Leifeld. New discussion, any discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Thank you. Tonight, under administration of absentee ballot. And for this item, we will have an introduction by City Administrator Dan Waticha. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. This goes back a few months, some ongoing conversations with Dakota County, and a few different iterations, and much improved from what was proposed a couple of months ago. But in general, the thought is that all absentee ballots could be handled through the county rather than each of the municipalities individually. And that having that centralized hopefully would streamline things, bring down some costs, make the process a bit easier. And the proposal winds up that in even years, the years that we have an election, the city would pick up 45% of the base costs, as well as some of the other processing costs, the postage and things like that. In the odd years, when we don't have a budget, we'd still pick up 25% of the base costs, the staff costs. Essentially, that's because can't hire and fire every other year. There's still stuff that they would have for preparing during off years, training and things like that also. So in the off year, a lesser amount, but obviously not the mailings and stuff like that. In the off years, the schools would participate. The other piece to it, and I don't see it noted in the memo, but I know it was it is in the memo, number 4. There is some money from the state for voter funds to the county, and if we did this participation, the county would apply that to our costs and help essentially buy down our and the other municipalities' costs for doing this. In the end, we would still need to have some additional election judges, some staffing here in the office, because people could still come here during those 46 days prior to the election, but certainly much less than if we were doing it ourselves. So we project it's about a $12,000 savings for the city. A little bit of an unknown. This is a big project and new for the county, and can they handle it? We think it's worth a try, and recommend that we would proceed with this. The thought being during the odd year, the second year of this pending two-year agreement, we could get out of it if it didn't work the first time. So we're not married to it forever. We do not have a JPA, Joint Powers Agreement yet that's being drafted, but because essentially the numbers depend on all municipalities or majority of the municipalities participating, the county's wanting to get a pulse for who is likely to be in. That's what's requested tonight is our intent to participate with this. We'll bring a JPA in a couple of weeks or a couple of meetings, but staff's recommendation is that we should enter into this and proceed with it. With that, I can take questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any questions, Council? Councilmember Fox?
Just as a point of clarification, Dan, thank you. If we receive the JPA and we disagree with it, we still have the opportunity to move away from this model.
Yeah, nothing signed yet. You might have somebody try to guilt you into, you guys said you were supportive of this, but we haven't seen the final language yet. We've seen drafts of it, but rather than rushing something that was a draft, figured it was easier to leave it as the bullet point concept. These bullet points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are straight from their
Great.
email. This isn't my words. This is the county's presentation of it.
Just checking. Thank you. I am in support of this move.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Pemble?
Dan, when we're talking about cost savings, and now, if we were to not like the first results, and in the odd year, say, we're out, and do we have to, let's say, re-energize our program and bring ourselves, I mean, we just can't turn the switch off and turn the switch on, is what I'm thinking here. And what are we talking about cost-wise on something like that?
Councilmember, I wouldn't be overly worried about the re-energizing our program because we will still be staffed during those absentee voting periods. So it's just, we're not as staffed up as we might be. So it's not a matter of needing to start something fresh. It's something that just, we need to turn up the volume, not turn it on. Costs, if we're predicting it's about a $12,000 savings, well, that's $12,000 cost annually.
With that answer, I would recommend a motion that we accept this moving forward as it is now, and looking at it saying, okay, we need to see the hard facts, and have that come back and visit us when we really have the hard numbers, knowing where we're at. But right now, I think it behooves this council to move ahead and accept this and be part of this program for election judging.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Pemble. We have a motion on the table. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. In reading this through, something that I really like is obviously taking away some of the burden from our own staff to be having to fulfill these duties, because there is a new burden that's been established with the length of which we're going to have to be allowing the public to be voting and such. And so I'm glad that there's a cost savings here that we're going to be seeing, and that it seems to me that it'll be more efficient. Something that caught my eye here is that it'll streamline election night reporting on absentee ballots, because the ballots will already be with the county. And so that's something that's happened in years past, where there's been glitches, with the counting of the ballots and reporting being delayed and not coming in until the wee hours of the night. And so I think that that's all really great. Something I just wanted to give the council a heads up on is we, the finance committee of the council, we've had 2 meetings now to talk about finances for the next year, and something that staff are bringing forward is asking to increase the dollar amount that's being paid to the election judges on the day, for their services that are being provided. And I think it was maybe $2 or $3 more an hour, which wasn't a lot, but it was trying to make it more competitive with other jurisdictions, what they've been offering. And so I just wanted to point out that hopefully this might offset, some of the expenses that we're having, with the election and such. So that when you see that we're going to have the, and I think that the 3 of us were supportive, yes, of helping increase the amount that's being paid to the election judges, that it'll be offset with this savings hopefully here. Okay. So, all right, that was it.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. We need a second to the motion. Oh, Councilmember House? Okay. New or additional discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. 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 Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Tonight we have a budget pre-approved of pickup trucks, and Dan will continue with an update on this.
Thank you. This is quicker than we intended to bring something like this to you guys. We wanted to be a little bit further along with the budget planning for next year. We wanted the chance to have the council have its workshop in September, possibly have its preliminary levy set in September. But there is a order window that opened up before we were ready, and so trying to move quick because of that. If we are interested in Dodge pickup trucks in the '24 budget, the window is open. We do not know a date that it'll be closed, but expect it in the next week or two. So bringing this now. Anticipate that later this fall we'll bring some other pre-authorizations because of short order windows or long lead times. But essentially, there's a couple of things in here. One, we are in this budget working towards bringing all of our fleet vehicles into a more regular and quicker replacement cycle. Let's have them on a 5-year rotation rather than, for most of them, driving them into the ground. And essentially what this is it's capitalizing on the fact that the city, through the state bid pricing, is able to get a better price than what the average person just off the lot would be able to get. When we drive it in the ground, we lose that difference in the value. If we turn around and sell it while it still has value, it actually is more cost effective on a per year basis. So that's what we're working towards. Because it's more vehicles in any given year than we normally would work towards or would normally be purchasing. We've been talking with Enterprise Fleet Management, and what Enterprise brings us is two things. One, the opportunity to lease the vehicle. So instead of purchasing it for $40,000, we could lease it for whatever the math is, $9,000 a year. So it gives us some, ease into the budget instead of doing it all at once. But then the other piece is because they acquire many more vehicles than we might, they have access to vehicles in some of these order windows better than we do. So we're hoping that some of the difficulty we've seen ordering vehicles the last couple of years may be easier with working with them. So that's why the lease instead of purchase like we normally have done in the past. But essentially, we're looking at 6 pickup trucks. They're replacing current trucks that are anywhere from 2001 to 2007 is the newest model on there that they're replacing. They're due, but this is the first step of several years at getting into a ongoing rotational basis for our vehicles. In the long run, it's a cost-effective approach. But I can take questions. I know that we did not really get into this mechanic during our Finance Committee discussions. We noted that there was a placeholder for the vehicles, but did not get into the details. I did give a preview of it back in December, but that was months ago. So I can certainly take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Council, any questions? Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dan, when I first started on the council, the city had been leasing vehicles at the time, which I know was several years before you began. But, and then the pendulum swung to, purchasing them. And so now we're going back to leasing. And I didn't see any cost benefit analysis actually in here. I know that in the last couple of years with vehicle shortages of, with COVID disruptions and supply chain and all of that whatnot, that it has been very difficult, I should say, still continues to be, and that the escalation on inflation has been kind of crazy. But, a couple of things have changed in the last year. And first of all, that the market for, selling used vehicles has, gone back down again, where the prices are beginning to lower and inflation is actually beginning to lower as well. And so I guess in my experience, when I've looked at, leasing versus, purchasing, it's been more cost effective just to purchase the vehicles and the equipment. I think a part of the challenge that the city seems to have is that we don't have a fleet manager, someone that's actively managing all of the city's fleet, from public works to parks to the police department and all of that. And so I can, I guess I can understand wanting to lease vehicles just because then it kind of alleviates the city when you start to get into that position after 5 years where you start to get more vehicle issues that emerge, and expenses and such. And so I'm kind of skeptical about this, to be honest. But I mean, if you're feeling really passionate about going in this approach, I guess if you could speak a little bit more about how it is that we're thinking that this is actually a cost-saving measure in the end, that would be useful. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember. A lot in there. I think that the basic question came down to, or the immediate question came down to explaining the cost savings. If there's some additional pieces, I can answer those as well. These numbers that I have are from pre-COVID, so they're not current numbers, but the math would work similarly. And the point to being pre-COVID is it avoids that concern about, for a few years, the value of used vehicles was holding extra high. Looking at pre-COVID, that's factored out of this example. But a vehicle might list at $44,000. Anybody off the street could go and buy off the lot for $44,000. Under the state contract, the city's able to purchase that same vehicle for $33,000, so about an $11,000 savings. If we drive it for 5 years, put on about 12,000 miles a year, that vehicle, pre-COVID, would have a trade-in value of $23,000. So about a $10,000 cost over 5 years, $2,000 a year. Where if we instead drove that vehicle into the ground, got every last mile out of it, which is what we've done with a number of our vehicles. The ones that are proposed here are, the newest ones are 16 years old. It winds up just on the cost of the vehicle more than $2,000 a year. So then when you start figuring you're keeping a newer vehicle, this has nothing to do with the lease, purchase it or lease it, I'm talking about just rotating every 5 years. We're reducing the maintenance on them. We've also got safer vehicles because there's less maintenance concerns, but they also have features such as airbags or backup cameras, just things like that that you might take more for granted in a newer vehicle we don't have in our older vehicles. So that's where that cost savings is if we drive it into the ground, we don't capture any of that reduced cost that we purchase it under the state contract. By turning around and selling it while it still has value, we capitalize on a portion of that cost difference. So that's where the savings is. It's not the fact that it's leased, it's that we're rotating them every 5 years. The difference with leasing it is if we were to go from purchasing, say, 6 vehicles last year, or in a typical year, to purchasing a dozen, well, now for those extra 6 at, $40,000 a piece, we're needing to come up with an extra $250,000 cash in order to do that this year, and again next year and the following year. So that's the reason for leasing it, is trying to phase in how do we make up that difference going from purchasing 6 vehicles to acquiring 12 vehicles. It's trying to make that more cost effective, and the thought is that over several years we would lease one less vehicle or two less vehicles and offset it with a purchase. So at every year, we're acquiring 12, but we're shifting that balance of how many are purchased, how many are leased, so that in 2 years or 5 years, we're entirely purchasing. So it's not a question of the lease, it's the lease is really trying to, the lease isn't what's making it cost effective. The cost effective piece is the 5-year rotation. The lease is trying to finance it because it's a lot of cash to come up all at once and get into a new system.
So what you're saying is in the short term, it's less money of an initial upfront cost than purchasing vehicles.
The lease would be an easier short-term cost to get into it, yes.
Okay, but, so you're estimating, I see that you're estimating what the annual leases are, but then, I guess what I'm missing is where was the cost-benefit analysis to it? So it's just kind of, it's more anecdotal, how do you say that, anecdotal, yes, about what it is that we're speculating the savings would be?
I can certainly forward you more detailed numbers if you would like.
Okay, yeah, I guess I'm just not understanding fully how it is, that it is a cost savings in the end. I mean, I'm all for having a safer fleet for staff to be, driving on a day-to-day basis and all of that, but, yeah, I guess I'm not fully tracking the financials, behind it. I just don't see that information present here, and so I'm not personally going to be supportive of it, just because when I've done this kind of analysis in the past, I haven't seen those numbers work out in the favor of, making the acquisition, but great, I'm glad that you're at least thinking outside of the box for how it is, to approach fleet management, because it has been something of concern, and so I guess that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fultz. Councilmember Layfield.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a similar question, I think. So I understand the 5-year turnaround. That makes sense to me because you turn around, you didn't drive the vehicle into the ground, you made money, you use that money for the next vehicle. I get that. But I don't see that when you lease the vehicle. So that's where I was more concerned about is I get the cost effectiveness of leasing, and then each year you said something about we'd lease one less vehicle. But when you're leasing the vehicles, you're going to pay that amount. You don't sell back your vehicle because you don't own the vehicle, right? So I guess I'm a little confused on that piece of it, but the upfront cost is cheaper, I understood you to say, because we'd be paying, say, $11,000 a year instead of $33,000 outright. So I can understand that, but if you could explain that piece to me about the resale after 5 years.
Yeah, at the end of the lease, we have purchased the vehicle or purchase it out for $1, essentially. So whatever value that vehicle still has, we could use to turn around into the next rotation.
Okay, so at the end of the lease term, whatever, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I don't know.
We're looking at setting it up as a 5-year because we're trying to get into a 5-year rotation.
Okay,
But
and I've never leased a car. So if you were to lease the vehicle, a pickup truck, and it would have cost you $33,000 to buy it outright, and these are fake numbers, right? And you lease that out over 5 years, how much are you paying for the vehicle after 5 years? Are you paying more than the $33,000 that you would have paid for it in the beginning?
at the end, yes, because we're leasing it, they're making money off of us.
Right.
That's why Councilmember Fulch is absolutely correct, saying it's more cost-effective purchasing the vehicles on a 5-year rotation than leasing them on a 5-year rotation. The difference is, how do we start that? We need money in order to start rotating them. So if we start them on a lease and wean ourselves off of that, we can get to where in a few years they're entirely purchased, and we're not beholden to the lease or the extra costs associated with that.
Okay, so then, Dan, do we have any numbers that would get us in a ballpark of what we're paying for the vehicle at the end of the lease? And I guess the one thing I do know about leases, and the reason I never did them, was I put on too many miles. So-
These are open leases without a mileage
No
requirement on
mileage
it.
cap, so at the end of each year, whatever, we don't have to worry about the 12,000 miles that our city staff has put on the vehicle.
We tend to be fairly low miles as it is, but these leases do not have that limit on them.
So, one final clarification then, so do we have an idea of how much we'd be paying for a hypothetical $33,000 vehicle?
The numbers I have are based off of a 60-vehicle fleet, not an individual vehicle. I can certainly provide those.
I guess that my only question before I could agree to this would be, over the course of those 5 years, what are we paying for that vehicle by saving money up front? Yes, we still have to pay that money. So that's my question, I guess, Dan. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Layfield. Councilmember House.
Yeah, I echo both council members here that it's hard to see savings in it. I understand to start a if we want to do a 5-year turnaround with vehicles that we need to start somewhere, but until I have further knowledge on numbers on this, I struggle to vote on it as well.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember House. Councilmember Fox.
Thank you, Your Honor. One thing I really like about this plan is that it gets it into a rotation where it's not all happening at once, like Dan said. So we could take on a vehicle and then take on another vehicle and then take on another. And then when we go to replace them full out in the next cycle, we don't have to spend, like you said, $250,000, $500,000 to do so. So I really like the thought behind it, and I'll echo what Councilmember Fulch said. I like thinking out of the box to try and get us into this system. I'm curious, Your Honor, your perspective of potentially, I hate this, tabling it until the next meeting. And Dan, I would appreciate your comments on that as well, just to give my peers a little bit more number background. I personally would support it tonight if we did vote on it, but.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Dan?
Just in answer to the tabling of it, these windows tend to be short, and some of what we saw last year was they might be a matter of a couple of days. This one, we do not know what the time frame is. It might be a couple of weeks, but I would not be surprised if the window for ordering this specific vehicle, Dodge pickup truck, was closed the next time we meet.
Thank you. I appreciate your sentiments there. And I would like to make a motion to approve this, this authorization to order the 6 pickup trucks for lease as part of the 2024 budget.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Fox. Councilmember Pemble, you were first?
I defer.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion.
Your Honor, I would like to motion to second that as well, to approve.
Okay, any other discussion now? We have a first and a second. Councilmember Pemble.
The question that I throw out here, and we've never leased vehicles personally, but in the businesses I've been involved with over the years, leasing a vehicle was the norm. The only exception was if the entity had its own maintenance department, its own mechanics, its supply house, all of that on staff, part of the organization to do those repairs. Because when you're purchasing straight out, yeah, there's warranties, but there's a lot of wear and tear things that aren't covered under warranties. And when you're looking at a leasing program, especially when you're talking about pickups that probably get a lot of use, and some of that probably pretty heavy-duty use in some situations. The repair, I mean, we've got a squad car sitting out at the other end of town that's been sitting there for over a week because it's waiting for parts. And, those things come into play. And in this situation, my feeling is that we need to proceed with the lease presentation as it was presented tonight, knowing that those windows, when the car manufacturers open those things up, are usually a week, 10 days, maybe at best. And businesses need, government needs to act accordingly. So I would support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pambo. Dan, I have a question. When it is leased, do they take care of all of maintenance? And what is do you know that structure of it?
The basic lease would not include any sort of maintenance package. If we wanted to, we could upgrade additional and have oil changes and set of brakes and tires included in that, but you're going to pay something additional for
Okay.
that. This is just looking at getting the vehicle, and we would still need to maintain a newer, lower mile vehicle, certainly not the maintenance we see on some vehicles now.
Right.
But
Okay.
those maintenance expenses would be borne. If there was an interest, I would tend to steer away from it, but if there was an interest, there certainly could be an option for, I don't know what it is, $100 a month to include tires
A
and
warranty
brakes
or whatever,
and
yeah.
other stuff.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Leifeld.
Thank you, Your Honor. So listening to my fellow council members, and I've always said in the past that very seldom do I want to go against what staff recommends, because this is your job, right? I'm elected by, the community to come and listen and help and try to make the best decisions. So that being said, I will support this. I don't like to use the word assume, but I know for a fact that staff has put the time and due diligence into this. And if staff believes it to be the best recommendation, I would be in support of that.
Thank you, Councilmember Leifeld. There is a motion, and, Councilmember House.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with Councilmember Leifeld. I will support this, but I would like to see what the numbers actually are on a cost-benefit analysis on this, just for future, and then also seeing what maintenance would look like, what that price range would be to add on maintenance through them, just for future. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember House. There is a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. Thank you, and that motion prevails. Council, any announcements? Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to give the council a little update about, today was League of Minnesota Cities Improving Service Delivery Policy Committee meeting. And so we had two particular subject matters that we had guest speakers on. And the first was on PFAS regulation in water and wastewater. And so I just wanted to give a quick update that the two folks that were present are state leaders when it comes to these issues. And the first was Sandeep Berman. He's the Drinking Water Protection Manager for the Minnesota Department of Health. And the other was Dana Vanderbosch, who is the Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And so what was particularly of interest was what Mr. Berman had to say about drinking water. As we all know, we're facing, what was it, a $69 million price tag now for the 3 water treatment plants to deal with the PFAS situation. And so I just wanted to tell you what he had said, and it was interesting. He had said that when they looked at all of the state municipal water sources that they had been testing, which was, the vast majority. They said that they had almost tested 900 and there was only like 49 that they haven't tested yet. And so they believe that the new, federal and state regulations that are coming forward with PFAS, that they only affect less than 1% of the population in our state. And so unfortunately, we're in that, 1% of, I should say, cities that are being affected by this issue. And then he showed a dashboard of where all of those cities are. And so I haven't had a chance yet to look, but it's supposed to be a map, like a dashboard map that you can look at, and it'll show all of the cities that are, at risk and such. So he went on to say that they've identified then all of the municipal water sources that are going to be in trouble like we are when they make the changes, when the federal and the state government makes the changes with the lowering of the acceptable standard. And that he has, that, him and his staff have gone ahead and that they've notified all of those cities, in which I know that Dan has said that in the past, that they've, received the notice from the Department of Health. And so he went on to say that they realize that there's not nearly enough aid, that they know that there's not enough funding that will cover, for those cities that have, this issue where you're not going to be in compliance. But then he also went on to say that once the federal rules and, the state, gets in alignment with those standards, that there's only going to be 2 years, maybe 3 years for all of those cities to be in compliance with the new standards. So there might only be a 2-year window to come into compliance. And so I thought that was really interesting that they recognized that there wasn't enough funds, but it's kind of like, well, too bad, so sad, figure it out. And so I had asked that if they would provide, to us all of the names of the cities that are in the same boat as we are, so that we can work together collaboratively with the state in figuring out funding sources that might be available. Jennifer Levitt, who is the city administrator for the city of Cottage Grove, was also present, and she agreed that we should be working together as cities, to lobby for as many resources as we possibly can, since there's such a few number of our cities that are in the same boat. And so I'm going to follow up on that and, obviously pull our city staff and the mayor into it. But I really believe that we should be working together to try to figure this out with the state and leverage as much funding as we possibly can. If there's just a handful of us that are in the same position. And so once I find that dashboard map of the state, I'll share that with you all. I'll send that to you because it was really quite surprising. And then the second group of discussions that we had were on adult cannabis use. And it was actually staff that are in the process of pulling together the Office of Cannabis, which is obviously a new office that's being pulled together. And what was interesting about that was it's going to be starting this fall through 2024. They're going to be trying to, draft rules and regulations. And it sounds like there's quite the gamut of policy and procedures that need to be figured out for regulating the cannabis industry. And so what we acknowledged was that there was a gap between what municipal governments are, have currently as ordinances, and that there's like a 6-month gap from when our moratoriums expire and when the state regulations kick in, that there's a gap there. And so they were glad, to hear that, as an issue, and they want to work with us. And so if we have any other issues that we're concerned about. They're asking for us to voice that, and I know that our own attorney, Corey Land, had lots of concerns, and so I had, Corey, I'll forward you that information about the contacts, because they want to hear from our staff attorneys as to what their thoughts are in that, and I think, now is the time to speak up. One point of interest that they did say that's on their short list of things to do is create sample ordinances for our cities to be able to follow, to make our lives a little bit easier. It felt like drinking from a fire hydrant, listening to all of the pieces of regulation that they have to put into place around this industry. And so I think we're going to be in for a whirlwind of information about enforcement and regulation at the local level, what's going to be allowable. So anyhow, I just wanted to give you a little update on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. All right, I have a few announcements. Summer rec programs at Levy Park, Tuesday, August 22nd. Performance in the park, Tui Wilson, comic stunt juggler, sponsored by Smead Manufacturer. Thursday, August 24th, music in the park with Jeff Dayton Band, which is a variety of music, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Thursday, August 31st, music in the park with Jonah and the Whales, pop, rock, and country, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. The Rec, Art, and Police will be at Lions Park on Wednesday, August 23rd, featuring Choice Art, DJ, and contests. Recommended for elementary and middle schoolers, supported by SC Toys, Country Financial, Hastings Lions Club, Hastings Family Service, Community Ed, and Hastings Prescott Arts Council. Support area makers and artisans at the Makers Market on Thursday, August 31st. Thursday, August 31st, the Devon J. Nording Foundation will hold International Overdose Awareness Day. City offices will be closed Monday, September 4th, in observance of Labor Day. Happy birthday to Councilmember Fox. The very last day of this month. Monday, August 28th, 7 p.m., Planning Commission. Tuesday, September 5th, 5:30 council. We have a city council budget workshop, and 7 p.m. council meeting. I would accept the motion to adjourn. Councilmember Pemble and Councilmember Fulch. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. We are adjourned.